last summer I had the opportunity to attend BCCE, which is this fantastic conference that focuses specifically on how we teach chemistry. And so first I just want to thank CCT, helped fund my trip to go there. And while I was there, I gave 2 presentations, and the focus of my presentations was really this idea that relevance increases retention. So I gave lots of examples of medical applications that I'm introducing into my Chem 101 course, so very freshman level course, to help make it more interesting, to help give the students some perspective on when am I going to use this information? How does chemistry relate to that? And I got a lot of very positive feedback. People were very excited about what we're doing here, and I think it's very much OIT's approach to teaching to do these kinds of hands-on applications, right? So 2 things that we heard a lot about at this conference were scale-up and flipping classroom methods. So this idea, if I'm going to put in more practical applications during class time, and I can't sacrifice content because this is a prereq for other courses, so I know my students have to have a certain level of knowledge when they leave, how do I find the time to put in practical applications and yet still teach them what they need to know? And so the answer to that is using some of these methods, having the students do more learning on their own at home, and then applying that knowledge in the classroom to make sure that they understand it. So I was really excited when I left the conference, and I made the commitment that I was going to get rid of 1 lecture a week and do some kind of active learning in my Chem 101. And to give you a little idea of what my Chem 101 course is like, so about 150 students take this course a year, so it's a very large class. And we divide that into 20 to 40 students per section. So there's a number of instructors that teach this course, very often 2 or 3 of us in the fall, sometimes adjunct instructors are teaching it. So we want to have some continuity between our courses, and that's something we were concerned about. It's also predominantly first-year students, and the makeup of this course, about 80% of them are pre-allied health. Now this is a highly motivated set of students. They know if they don't get an A or B in my course, they're likely not going to get into their program. That's a reality that they're facing. It's very competitive. And so these students are really willing to work and work hard, and they're a great set of students. I also have about 18% engineering students, and while Chem 101 isn't required for most of the engineering majors, I get students that maybe have never had chemistry before, and so it's an introduction to help prepare them for SES level of chemistry in the 200 series. And then there's always the 2% of students that are just taking it for a lab science credit. Maybe they were good at math and they thought, oh, chemistry would be more interesting than memorizing biology, and so that's why they go that route. And what's funny is spring term, I always have 1 or 2 seniors that have put off their lab science till the very end of their career. So a nice mix of students. Now, the big reason we're concerned about this course, oh, and I just shut that off, is that we have a 15 to 20% DWF rate. Now that varies a little based on instructor. It also varies by term. Not surprisingly, fall term we see a higher rate of loss in the class, and that is because we have students coming to college for the first time, they have heavy course loads, they're overwhelmed, so a lot of factors that I really can't control there. And nationally, that's pretty good actually. I spoke to other instructors and they were saying closer to 25–30%. So it's not unusual that we're at a 15 to 20% rate. But still, we'd like to see that go down. Of course, we want to retain as many students as we can. So there's some inherent challenges to doing active learning in your classroom. And so these were some of the things I was facing. First, it's very time consuming. This is a course I've taught a lot. And so it was really nice to have this packaged class that I was good at teaching, and to do something new and different, well, that was concerning and also very time consuming. A lot of extra work for me. I also find that especially first-year students, they're often unprepared for active learning. So they're not independent learners. They don't always come with a knowledge study set that I would expect. If they're learning more on their own outside of class, some of them are really going to struggle with that. And then, how do I limit course content? There's so many amazing examples I could bring into the room. How do I decide which ones would be the best for my students? And then retain all of that information that I need them to know when they leave. But the biggest challenge out of all of them that I faced was really the learning environment, which was kind of surprising to me. But so here's our traditional classroom here, and you have a lecture hall. It's very set up if I'm going to stand in front of the class and speak. But it's not great if I'm putting them into small groups and doing activities. So when I taught this class this last fall, this is the kind of classroom I taught in. And I found it very much limited student interaction. Yes, they would interact with the person directly next to them, maybe the person behind them or in front of them, but there wasn't a lot of good discussion. So to help solve this problem, and there's other professors in our department who are working on this, we got together and we're like, we're gonna devote this classroom to this kind of teaching. And so we just rearranged the tables. Okay, so same classroom, different picture, and all we've done is put the students more in a group type of setting. I love teaching in the new classroom. It is going so much easier for me because it's working better. Now, ideally, someday I'd love to see something like this. This is a scale-up classroom right off the Scale-Up website. And what you see are nice round tables, which even better facilitate conversation and group interaction. You also see some technology here. So there's laptops at tables. There's some modeling things that I could do if I had those kinds of things available to me. Now, because I put all of my course information on Blackboard, and I encourage my students, you can either print my course notes and then work on them in class and the activities we'll be doing, or you can just bring your tablet or laptop into class. What I'm finding is about half of them now are bringing their computers with them. So now I'm starting to be able to do some of these more interactive computer applications because they have their own technology. I'm not having to put a drain on any of the department resources, but I can still do activities. And as long as one person at every table has a computer, it works out. So I'm going to go through just some examples of the types of activities, and what I'm hoping you'll get from this is that there's a lot of different ways you can go with this, and you can make it apply to almost any classroom. So in day one of my class, I started this about a year ago. I have the students actually make flashcards. Now, this is something as professors we've all done a lot of studying, right? And so we think, oh yeah, flashcards, everybody uses flashcards to memorize. It's a great tool for that. What I found is that's not true of our students. So the first time I did this, I was shocked by how many of them I said, put this information on flashcards and start to study it. And they just looked at me like I was crazy. How do I do that? I'm putting what on what side and this on the other side. So now I actually lead them through it, and it surprised me. Now some of my students, yes, they can do it without any instruction. Some really need that extra instruction. So I lead them through it, and they make these flashcards, and then I have them work on the flashcards a little bit in class, and then I have them quiz each other. So I have them group up, which is a great icebreaker. And it's forcing this freshman level student who may not naturally form their own study groups to be put in a study group. And so what I see happens by doing this on the first day is a lot of times phone numbers get exchanged, and then they continue to study together throughout the term. So it's been a really positive experience. Now, I wasn't super excited about spending class time on something rudimentary like memorizing information. But this is so fundamental to what they're going to be doing the entire rest of their term that if they don't get this, they're going to struggle through my whole course. And I just decided, yeah, I'm going to devote some class time. And I've seen a marked improvement in student scores because I am. And then, so I'm pretty traditional, and I actually bring in note cards, and I cut them in half just to save a little money, and so I have the students make their flashcards on that. And I had a student a couple of terms ago tell me, you know there's an online program that you can do this, and you can put this on your smartphone in an app, and you can make flashcards. And so they got me some information, and then I did some more research, and I found there's actually a couple. Both of these are free to download if you're interested, and students can create their own quizzing, testing. There's a variety of ways. You can have it be fill in the blank, flashcards, and it will test you over the information. So Quizlet and Memrise are both free to you. And both of those can also be used on a laptop or a smartphone, so they can carry their smartphone with them and have their flashcards handy anytime. So it was nice to have a student come to me and say, oh, you're so old school. Here, try it this way. Another example that I'm using in my class is this density study. So I set up a demo in my class that looks like this, where I have a diet can of soda floating and a regular can of soda that sinks. And then I present a small case study. So I tell my students, you're rafting on the Rogue River in a small boat called a Tahiti. And I explain that these are very tipsy boats, so if you enter the rapid the wrong way, you're going to roll. So imagine you roll in the rapid and you lose your cooler and the contents spill out, and you're able to retrieve your diet soda, but your regular soda is nowhere to be found. And I told them this is based on real life experience. My husband and I are big rafters, and so I've seen more than one person lose a cooler in the river. And what's fun about that is a lot of the students are from the Rogue area, and that's where I raft a lot, and so it's nice because many of them have those experiences. And then our outdoor program offers rafting every year, and they will go and use these Tahitis. And so when I've talked about this in Chem lecture, I've had more than one student come back to me and say, hey, I went rafting on the Rogue because you made it sound so fun. So that's, you know, another way to get students connecting, right? And then I pose these questions to the students. So I'm having them do some scientific method here, which is really something I'd like entry-level students to leave a science course with, is just an understanding of how to apply scientific method. And I leave the questions very open-ended, and I offer no guidance about what kind of report I want written up. And so what's interesting is I get a wide variety of reports. So some will be extremely brief, some are extremely detailed. But I like leaving it open like this because then I know who in the class has a good solid scientific background and who doesn't. It provides a lot of good feedback. As far as grades go, I tend to give credit as long as their thinking is reasonable. Okay? So I don't necessarily get real nitpicky. I will give suggestions. So if they miss a detail, like, oh, well, you need this formula, or you might need this piece of equipment to make that measurement. So those are ways that I interact with it. So the idea of flipping the classroom, a lot of professors completely flip the classroom, and when you hear that term, often what they're talking about is they have their lectures videotaped. Students watch them all outside of class, and then in class you do application-based learning. So I don't particularly enjoy being videotaped, and so I was like, I don't really want to do that. And there's a lot of good videos that already exist for 100 level chemistry, so I've just done a lot of watching what videos are available to my students. And for this particular assignment, so electron configuration is something students really struggle with. It's very abstract, and you start talking about what an atom looks like, and they just get lost, right? I can't see this, it's remote for them. And so I present it in class, the topic, and I briefly go over it. I then have them watch this video series, and this particular video series is from Crash Course Chemistry, which, as far as chemistry videos, some of them are really bad. Not surprisingly, it's pretty dull. And I like the Crash Course because it's a little bit entertaining. And on this specific topic, they do an interesting analogy of symphonics related to electron configuration and wave patterns, and so it brings in a different perspective than how I teach it in the classroom. And sometimes that's what students need, is someone else's approach to it. So I have them watch this video. Now, to ensure that they do that, because they are freshmen, I created an assignment that is fill in the blank. So essentially they are watching the video and making some notations as they go through. After I gave this assignment for the first time, I asked the students, so what do you think of the video? It's the first time I've done that, and the entire class told me they hated it. It was hard to watch. The guy went too fast, or he was lame, which I don't know if you can get away from that with chemistry professors, but there's a little of that there. Okay, so that's all going on. But what was interesting is that even though they all said that they hated it, not a single person missed the question on electron configuration when I gave the quiz that week. And when it got to the final, I only had 3 people out of the entire class miss it on the comprehensive final. So what that tells me is they may not have liked it, but they really learned the information. So the assignment is not going to go away this term, even though the students didn't care for the video. It was effective in what I wanted it to do. We also do some molecular modeling. So in the past, I just had students draw molecules and what that might look like. This last term, I brought in these wooden models. We already own them. They were in our lab. They don't get used too often. And so I brought them in and had them actually build models. Now, one of the challenges of this is I thought if I just gave some basic instructions, so carbon molecules are this color and oxygens are this, and so put them together to make a molecule. And what I found is that didn't work. I need to scaffold that assignment much more or give more specific direction. I really felt like they struggled with this, and what I had hoped would take about a half a class period ended up taking an entire class period. So some kinks to work out there, but I did get a lot of feedback that they liked seeing it in 3D, and especially for my kinetic learners, they like the putting things together and building. I can always tell who my engineers are because when we do activities like this in the class, they really like it. My allied health students are less excited about building things. And then for a lot of the coursework, I just give worksheets, essentially. So in the past, I would have gone over all these examples with them and led them through answering all of these questions. Now, I give a couple of examples that are similar, and then I hand out this worksheet, and they work through it on their own in their groups, and they talk about it. And then I have the tables compare answers with the table across for them so they can check each other and make sure they're getting the right answers and those kinds of things. And what I find is that students, they don't particularly care for doing it this way. They want to be led through it. They like that process, but they get so much more out of it because those who are struggling recognize when they start to struggle, and you can really see where it starts to fall apart for them as they're working through these kinds of problems. And so right now, Professor Lund and I, one of the other chemistry instructors that teaches this course a lot, are working on a set of course notes that has these built in. So it'll have a few given examples, and then it'll have these worksheets ready to hand out to the students. And that way they could just print it off Blackboard and have it with them when they come to class. We're working on the fly right now because we're kind of developing all of this at this point. So some of the outcomes that have come from doing all of these things. The first is that activities took a little bit longer than I anticipated, and I will say that tends to be very true, and I don't know if that's because I'm teaching first-year students and so they're not great independent learners yet, or if it's a trend for all of our students. I don't teach a lot of upper division courses, so I don't get the opportunity to interact as much with students who are farther along. But one of the ways that I'm trying to remedy this is by providing more scaffolding, clearer instructions, stepping them through the process a little more. So I will still have them answer questions, but maybe step them through it. Like if I'm finding density, oh, I'm going to need mass and volume. Well, how do I find the volume? And so asking questions a little more independently to help plan for that. And then also just allowing a little more time. And then one of the things that came up when I was at BCCE is that many professors mentioned that they see a change in their evaluation scores when they switch to these methods. And I think that's important to know. Obviously, we're all concerned about those things, and it comes up for us. And for many of them, they see a downward trend in their scores when they first do this. And I think that makes sense, especially if you're teaching entry-level students, because they're used to having someone tell them exactly what they should be doing, and suddenly you're putting that responsibility on them, and they don't particularly care for that. And I haven't gotten my eval scores back for last term, but just based on comments in the classroom, I won't be surprised if they're down just a little. Like, I had one student tell me that I was like the Cheshire Cat. She speaks in riddles. She never answers my questions. She gives me another question and another question, and I laughed because I was like, that's what we should be doing. You have to wrestle with that a little more. But that's not what they want, right? They're looking for, give me the answer quick so I can move on. But some great outcomes that came out of this as well. Students appeared to have a better understanding of my chemistry concepts. And the most exciting part of that was I really felt like they conceptually got it better. So before, I'd have lots of students who could crunch the numbers, but they didn't necessarily understand what was behind those numbers. They could repeat a problem if they had seen a similar problem, but if I reworded the problem or posed it in a different way, a lot of them would miss it on a test. That's happening less now that I'm using these methods. So that was really exciting to see. Students also seem to be forming closer relationships with their peers. Because they're constantly working in these small groups, they're making friends, they're forming natural study groups, and so all of that's benefiting them. And there's lots of research that shows that if entry-level students have close relationships, they're much more likely to stay in college, and so that's a great outcome of this. And then the most surprising and exciting outcome, I think, was that I did not fail a single student. For the very first time ever teaching this course, I didn't fail anyone. Now that said, I still lost about the same number of students that I had lost in previous terms. But what happened was they withdrew. So the students are recognizing earlier if they're not going to make it. And to me, that's really positive. It's better for them not to have the failing grade on their transcript. It's also better for them because they're self-evaluating there and doing some things that they're not great at when they come to us out of high school. So I thought this was a really positive outcome. Now, would I have liked to see the DWF rate go down? Of course. But at least they're getting that information sooner. And so that was one of the takeaways. And hopefully that'll stay true. I was just looking at last term's data, so we'll see how this progresses over the year and how we'll be continuing to do this. So that's what we've been working on. Any questions for me? Comments?
I have a question. So when you are doing the worksheets, and they're discussing and working on the worksheets within their groups, what is your role and how do you sort of manage that class time?
So normally I walk around the classroom and if students have a question, if they get stuck at some point, and it gives me an opportunity to help those individuals who need the extra help. But what I see happening more and more is that this mentoring happens, and so the students that are getting it start teaching the students that aren't getting it, and so my role becomes almost obsolete in some of those settings. And so that's what I think accounts for some of those evaluation scores going down, is it's like, oh, it seems like the professor doesn't do a lot. Now I'm trying to limit my lecture time every day to no more than 15 minutes, and then the rest of the time we're doing something. And so yeah, I'm almost making my job obsolete by forming these really well orchestrated assignments and things. Other questions?
How do you sort of logistically, how do you deal when, so are the activities in class, are they graded? I mean, what if a student, misses class type thing? How do you handle that sort of thing?
Okay, so I've told the students that I do give some points for in-class participation. I count a certain percentage towards that. Now, I try to give some free passes, so if they're there the majority of the time and they're doing the work in class, then they'll get their participation points. One of the things that I'm talking about with Professor Lund, what he's doing is actually having them turn in this homework for graded. So if you finish the assignment in class, that's great. If you need to, take it home and finish it and then turn it in to me. And he's giving some credit, but what he's finding is that's a lot of extra grading. And so we're trying to find a balance. What's the right thing? And I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're looking at that. But we do try to give some credit for doing this, for sure. Which the students appreciate, because then they're getting a little boost in their work if they're attending class regularly.
But it sounds like it's really not a big portion of the grade.
It's not. It's still, we do weekly quizzes in chemistry. We have 2 big exams plus a comprehensive final. So, and that's the majority of their points. So it's probably 5% of their score would go towards participation in these activities. But you can really tell when a student's getting it and when a student isn't, just based on how they're working on the problems.
Is this a class with a lab?
It is a class with a lab.
And how are the students comparing what you're doing in class to the lab?
Now in lab, because we deal a lot with chemicals and things, like our lab experience, we focus more there because we have equipment and things available. And in the classroom, I'm limiting it to activities that would be safe for a classroom setting, but I do get a lot of comments, there's a lot of overlap here. But that's what we try to do. We're trying to further cement these topics when they go to lab. Yeah. What's also interesting is in the past, for chemistry, we have lab grades separate from lecture grade. They're not a combined score. And very often I'll see students who are really great in lecture and aren't good at application-based in lab, which is interesting because in a lot of labs, your lab score helps bring up your lecture score, and that isn't always the case in chemistry. And I'm seeing that happening less now that I'm doing these interactions in class, because they're just more used to thinking scientifically and problem solving and some of those things.